starting my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, our motion today is about whether or not we need the individuals to pass up to general knowledge in order for them to vote. And I believe this limitation for the massive individual is a very harmful thing to do in the long run. But first, let me rebut some of the point. First, the limitation set by the government is not very clear because first they stated the test will be done before each election. But as we know, there's a lot of elections starting from the presidency to all the way to the PRT. And I believe this unclarified limitation will be harmful. And then they also do not explain how this could help in knowing the candidate, because the main premises what they talk about is because they believe the voter doesn't know about the candidate, but we do not really see how the voter will know more about the candidate if they just test on standardized things, test on general knowledge. And they stated that by voting uninformed, it is a complicit for the candidates. But I believe it is more a complicit thing if we limited the amount of people that can vote. And I will get it in my arguments. First, there are two main arguments that I will deliver. First, I believe the standardized testing on the status quo right now is not viable. And second, I believe the problem is not on the voter itself, but on the candidates and the general information. First, the standardized testing. In the proposed solution given by the government, I believe that first standardized testing is classes, because first classes which means it is only benefit to certain classes, in which case middle and high classes, and it's very unfair towards those who of the lower socioeconomic background, because they of the lower socioeconomic background doesn't really have the necessary resources, necessary leisure time to study for the test, and it's not the same case for the higher class. And this, I believe, first it will incite inequality between the poor and the rich voter, because, like I said, the rich may have the resources to spend on studying, but the poor doesn't. And the solution given by the government, in which the test, even if failed, can be redo next year or something, I believe it is not really helpful, because we cannot expect them to pass the test next year because they did not change. They still of the lower economic background. They still do not have the time and the resources to study. And next is the standardized testing is very unrealistic, ladies and gentlemen. Voting usually done by a lot of people, especially the presidential debate, presidential voting election. But they expected it can be done by initial party, this testing. But the difference between election and testing is election, the logistic is very large, and we need only provided paper, etc. But testing requires a lot more than that, and I don't believe they can justify the allocation of these resources towards this test. And they also do not state that there is a lot of unreachable area that may have a hard time in order to reach the place of testing, and this is a systematic disenfranchisement of people who are living in villages or in the lower class like slums and poorer part of the city. And it is unrealistic because the test itself doesn't really correlate into knowledge, because, ladies and gentlemen, test only tests your memory, it doesn't test how much you know about something. For example, is back then the KPK they need to redo the test of TWK or the wawasan kebangsaan, but a lot of them failed. But I believe they are more knowledgeable than the average people. And next, the unjustified result. I believe by the point I made, it is first systematically disenfranchise a lot of lower class and poor people, and it limits them to access the right to vote. And second of all, I believe the result only tests on memory, not knowledge, and this can lead to a lot of implications, like people could cheat, people could buy cheap tests, and people who redo doesn't really have guarantee they can vote. Which means it will limit their vote as a human being, as a people of this democratic nation. And my second argument is about the problem. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is not about the voter that do not know the candidate. It's about the candidate itself and their exclusivity of aim and goals. Because first, the solution we are counter-proposing is first, I believe we need the regulation for the campaign itself, and we need to have an open access of knowledge on these candidates. First, the regulation. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of candidates campaign, but this campaign we do not really have a record like recording or a blog, etc. And this campaign doesn't really regulate by the government. I believe if the government supervise this campaigning, and if they held an open public socialization, such as, for example, the presidential candidate debate, I believe this will in turn make the aim, the goal, and the proposal of these candidates be more open and more reaching up to a lot of the common people. And second of all, the open access of knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, what's difficult is the standardized test only tests on your general knowledge, but it doesn't really correlate, because the reason this machine exists because they do not know about the candidate itself. They do not know about the proposal. And can you blame them? Because it is very difficult to find them on the internet or on the open access resources or websites. And I believe if the government provided a list of database, provided all of the candidates and their goals and their proposal, I believe this will increase the knowledge of the voter, and it is, I believe, more inclusive to everyone, because as we all know, in the status quo, internet is accessible to a lot of people. It is very affordable and it is very reachable. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe this solution is better alternative rather than keeping most of the majority of people behind knowledge wall, behind the test that we do not know whether or not they have the effect, if it's good or not. And so, to summarize, I believe at the end of the day, the problem is not about the voter who do not know. I believe the problem is because the government doesn't really provide them a way to know the candidates, and the candidate itself doesn't really give a campaign, a recorded campaign, a campaign that is open access to all. But by changing this, by giving them regulation, by giving them a platform and a place to access all of this information, I believe it is better rather than hoping they will pass the political general knowledge test. And I guess that's all for me. Thank you.